Hello, everyone. Today I'd like to guide you through making a warm, aromatic bowl of miso soup, simple enough to prepare right in your own kitchen. Together, we'll take a gentle step into the heart of traditional Japanese cooking. When people think of Japanese cuisine, miso soup is often one of the very first dishes that comes to mind. It's a timeless staple, enjoyed every day in countless Japanese households, and it carries a character quite different from the soups we're used to in Western kitchens. When I think back to my childhood, the first thing I remember isn't a toy or a place. It's a scent. A warm, earthy aroma drifting softly through the house in the early morning light. Every day, before the sun had fully risen, my mother would quietly move through the kitchen. There was no alarm clock, only the gentle clatter of wooden lids, the faint rustle of steam, and the unmistakable scent of miso soup rising from the stove. That was how I knew it was time to wake up. She never said much while cooking, but in that silence was a rhythm, a ritual. She would choose the vegetables with care, whatever was in season, whatever was fresh at the little shop down the street. Sometimes daikon radish, sometimes onion or a bit of sweet potato. It didn't matter. What mattered was that every bowl was made with love, and it was always warm. To me, miso soup wasn't just breakfast. It was home. It was comfort. It was the feeling of being cared for before the day even began. Now, many years later and a whole ocean away, I still make miso soup in the mornings. The ingredients may change. The kitchen is different. But that quiet moment, the steam rising, the aroma wrapping around me, it's still the same. Before we dive into the recipes and flavors, I want to invite you into that memory. Because miso soup isn't just about cooking. It's about starting the day with presence, with warmth, with gratitude. Let's begin this journey not with a recipe, but with a feeling. What exactly is miso? A 1,000-year-old secret. So what is miso really? It may look like a simple brown paste tucked quietly into a container in the fridge. But this little ingredient carries a story that began over 1,000 years ago. Miso is made through fermentation, a kind of gentle transformation that turns simple ingredients into something rich, deep, and nourishing. The basic recipe? Cooked soybeans, salt, grains like rice or barley, and a magical little starter called koji. Koji is a living culture, tiny, invisible helpers that slowly break down the soybeans, releasing layers of flavor and nutrition over time. It's the same ingredient used to make sake and soy sauce. In a way, it's one of the quiet architects of Japanese cuisine. Once combined, this mixture is left to rest, for weeks, sometimes for years. And during that waiting, something extraordinary happens. It becomes miso. There are over 1,300 varieties of miso in Japan today. That's not a typo, 1,300. And because miso isn't a one-size-fits-all food, it changes depending on the region, the climate, the ingredients, even the history of the people who made it. In the snowy north, rice grows well, so they use rice koji to make pale, sweet miso. In the warm south, barley thrives, and so the miso is darker, heartier, and in some remote corners of Japan, there are rare misos made entirely from soybeans, passed down through generations. What I love most is this. Miso reflects the land it comes from. It carries the soul of a place. So when you open a container of miso, you're not just opening a seasoning. You're opening a piece of history, a taste of tradition, a quiet wisdom that's been nourishing bodies and spirits for centuries. And the best part? You don't need to travel to Japan to enjoy it. You can bring that warmth, that heritage, into your own kitchen, one spoonful at a time. In the next part, we'll explore how to choose the right miso and why it matters more than you think. Red, white, and everything in between, choosing your miso. If you've ever stood in front of a shelf of miso at an Asian grocery store, you might have felt it. That quiet wave of confusion. White tubs, red tubs, yellow tubs, labels you can't read. Words like shiro, aka koji, barley, fermented. It can feel like miso is speaking a language all its own. So let's make it simple. There are three main types of miso you'll come across: white miso, red miso, and mixed or soybean-only miso. White miso or shiro miso. It's the gentlest kind, made with cooked soybeans and fermented for a short time, just a few weeks or months. The result? A pale color, a smooth texture, and a taste that's slightly sweet, mild and incredibly forgiving. This is the miso I recommend if you're just starting out. It's versatile. It blends into soups, dressings, marinades, even pasta sauces. You can think of it as the friendly neighbor of the miso world. Always kind, never too loud. Red miso, or aka miso. This one is bold, made with steamed soybeans and aged for much longer, sometimes up to 5 years. It's darker, saltier, and has a deep, earthy flavor that lingers. Red miso is like a warm fireplace in winter. It pairs beautifully with hearty ingredients: potatoes, mushrooms, shellfish, anything that can hold its own. But for newcomers, it might be intense. So think of red miso as something to grow into. And then there's the rare kind, soybean-only miso made without any grains at all. It's simple, powerful, and not always easy to find. But if you ever come across it, you're tasting something truly special. Something passed down in quiet towns, made in small batches, never rushed. Now here's a secret I wish someone told me earlier. The miso you choose changes everything. Use red miso in a delicate tofu soup, and it might overpower. Use white miso in a winter stew, and it could get lost. But find the right match, and suddenly the soup sings. And here's the beauty. There's no right miso, only the one that speaks to you, the one that fits your meal, your mood, your moment. Next, I'll show you one of my favorite miso pairings of all time, one that started with a root vegetable I found at the farmer's market and became a family staple. Soup that changes with the seasons: Jerusalem, artichoke, and onion. It began with a walk through the farmer's market. And late summer was giving way to early fall, and tucked between baskets of heirloom tomatoes and golden squash, I found them: Jerusalem artichokes, small, knobby, earthy little roots, with the scent of soil still clinging to their skins. They weren't part of any recipe I had planned, but something about them, something humble and honest, reminded me of home. And just like that, a new version of miso soup was born. I grew up eating miso soup with potatoes and onions. It was a simple recipe my mother made often. Soft, nourishing, just enough to warm you from the inside out. But in my own kitchen, thousands of miles away, I replaced the potatoes with Jerusalem artichokes. Not because I had to, but because this was what the earth was offering now. That's one of the quiet truths of miso soup. It changes with the seasons. And it welcomes what's around you. Jerusalem artichokes are rich in fiber, gentle on digestion, and slightly sweet when cooked. I wash them gently, peeling only the rough spots, and slice them thin. Then come the onions, soft, golden, melting into the broth like memories into time. I don't rush this part. I let the vegetables soften slowly, letting the kitchen fill with that same warmth I knew as a child. And here's the beautiful thing. There is no right vegetable for miso soup. Only your vegetables. The ones you find at your market. The ones growing in your garden. The ones that call to you, even if you didn't plan for them. Because miso soup isn't a rigid recipe. It's a reflection of where you are, what season you're in, and how you choose to care for yourself that day. Some mornings, I use red miso for depth and grounding. Other times, white miso for a lighter touch. There's no rule, just rhythm. And always, I wait until the very end to add the miso, not just to preserve its delicate flavor, but because it feels like a moment of pause, a final breath, a blessing over the bowl. In the next part, I'll share the soup that brought my mother's memory back to life: daikon and aburaage, simmered in a broth passed down through generations. From my mother's kitchen, daikon and aburaage. Some recipes stay with us not because they're complicated, but because they remind us of someone we love. For me, that dish is daikon and aburaage miso soup. Every time I make it, I can almost hear my mother humming softly in the kitchen, the soft rhythm of her hands moving without hurry, and the quiet warmth that seemed to fill the whole room, even on the coldest mornings. And daikon is a long white radish, mild and slightly peppery when raw, but when simmered, it softens into something almost tender-hearted. Aburaage, thin slices of fried tofu, soaks up broth like memory soaks up time, quietly, deeply, without effort. But before the vegetables, there's the broth, and this time, I'm not using instant dashi. I'm going back to what my family always used, iriko dashi. Iriko are small dried sardines, also known as niboshi in some parts of Japan. They may not look like much at first glance. Tiny silver fish, heads and bellies intact. But inside them is a wealth of flavor, minerals, and quiet nourishment. I start by gently removing the heads and inner parts. My mother said they can make the broth bitter. Then I place them in cool water, letting them soak overnight. There's something meditative about it. No heat. No noise, just water and time and trust. By morning, the water is transformed. Clear, aromatic, deeply umami. It's a broth that carries more than flavor. It carries history. While the dashi simmers, I peel and slice the daikon, cut the aburaage, and remember how my mother used to tilt her head, squint at the pot, and say, "Let the daikon speak. Don't rush it." So I don't. I let the daikon soften slowly in the broth. I add the aburaage, and only at the very end I stir in the miso, white on gentle days, red when I need strength. Sometimes I sit with this bowl and say nothing at all, because some meals aren't meant to be talked over. They're meant to be felt. I'll show you a miso soup as light as morning sunlight, built on seaweed, tofu, and the quiet elegance of leeks. Gentle mornings. Tofu, seaweed, and leek in kombu dashi. Some mornings don't need coffee, they just need stillness, a slow breath, a warm bowl, and a soup that whispers, not shouts. That's how I feel about tofu, seaweed, and leek miso soup. It's soft, simple, the kind of meal that doesn't try to impress you, but quietly holds you like sunlight filtering through curtains. This soup begins with kombu, dried kelp, not flashy, not fragrant, but full of quiet depth. I place a single sheet into cool water the night before, and by morning, it becomes a gentle broth, barely colored but rich in umami. It's a reminder that you don't need boldness to have flavor. Sometimes you just need patience. I add a handful of bonito flakes just after turning off the heat. They swirl and dance in the steam like autumn leaves in the wind. Then they settle, and the broth is ready. And next come the vegetables. Leeks, carefully washed, because dirt hides in quiet places. Thin slices of daikon, their texture turning soft and sweet in the broth. And just before serving, I add the seaweed, rehydrated with care. It blooms like a flower in warm water. Then comes the tofu. I use silken tofu, the kind that trembles when you hold it. Some days I cut it right in my hand. Other days I use a board. There's no rush, just slow, deliberate movements, like making something sacred. Finally, the miso, stirred in gently at the very end, never boiled. Because miso, like trust, fades when overheated. And that's it. No fireworks, no big flavors, just a bowl of quiet nourishment, perfect for the mornings when the world feels too loud, perfect for evenings when you want to come back to yourself, perfect for anyone who needs a little peace, at one spoonful at a time. One soup, many souls. Why there is no single recipe. If you ask 10 people in Japan how to make miso soup, you'll get 10 different answers, and none of them will be wrong. That's because miso soup doesn't belong to one rule book. It belongs to the land, to the season, to the hands that make it. In snowy Hokkaido, miso soup might be filled with potatoes, mushrooms, and hearty red miso. In coastal towns, you'll find clams and leafy greens swimming in a light, sea-scented broth. In mountain villages, maybe just daikon and tofu simmered over a fire. And in my home, it changes, week by week, mood by mood. That's the gift of miso soup. It meets you where you are. Tired? Use gentle ingredients, need grounding, go deeper with red miso and root vegetables. Feeling curious? Try something new. Add corn, celery, and even a touch of ginger. You don't need to get it right. You just need to listen to the season, to your body, to the ingredients calling from your fridge. Once, someone asked me, "What's the most authentic miso soup?" I smiled and said, "The one you make, with care." Because miso soup isn't about performance. It's about presence. It's not just about tradition. It's about attention. Choosing what's fresh, what's kind to your body, what feels right today. So don't worry about measurements. Taste, adjust, trust yourself. There's beauty in that freedom. And perhaps that's what makes miso soup so timeless. It never tries to be impressive. It just shows up. Simple, honest, adaptable. Kind of like the best people in our lives. And in the final part of this journey, I want to leave you with what miso soup truly offers us. Not just a recipe, but a rhythm, a ritual, a return. The spirit of miso, a warm habit, a daily gratitude. Every culture has its quiet comforts. A cup of tea, a piece of bread fresh from the oven, a familiar scent in the morning air. For me, it's miso soup. Not just for the flavor, though it's rich and layered and full of memory. Not just for the nourishment, though it feeds the body as gently as it feeds the soul. But because of what it represents, a return to rhythm. In a world that moves so fast, miso soup asks us to slow down, to stir gently, to taste with care, to use what we have, to appreciate what's in front of us. It reminds me that cooking doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. That nourishment can be quiet. And that healing often comes not from something new, but from something timeless. And every bowl we've made together, from Jerusalem artichokes in autumn to daikon passed down from mothers to tofu that trembles like morning light, they all carry the same message. Be here now, be grateful, and eat with love. There's an old saying in Japan. If you drink miso soup in the morning, your body and mind will be ready for the day. I believe that, not just because it's healthy, but because it's intentional. A warm bowl, a slow breath, a good start. So, my dear friends, which miso soup would you like to try first? Do you have ingredients waiting in your fridge right now? Or perhaps a memory, just like mine, wrapped in steam? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this video brought you comfort, please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and turn on notifications so we can keep cooking together. More than recipes, I'll be sharing the spirit behind them. Simple habits, honest meals, and ways to bring a little more peace to the plate. Until next time, stay well, eat slowly, and live with gratitude.